Welcome to Teaching That Counts, a podcast dedicated to the teaching and learning of mathematics. I'm your host, Abel Maestas, and I love to talk about math education. Together with my amazing guests, we'll explore several topics in the world of math teaching and student learning. Whether it's building thinking classrooms, healing math trauma, building student and teacher math confidence, or creating more equitable math workspaces. If it's going to help students learn math and teachers teach math, then we'll talk about it. So if you're a teacher, a parent like me, admin, or a coach like me, I hope you find something that can inspire you and help build your practice listening to this podcast. You can always find us online at www.teachingthatcountspodcast.com. Yeah, I know that's long, but hey, that's the URL. You can find me on YouTube at Maestas Math or on socials at Maestas Teach. Thanks for listening, and I hope you enjoy the podcast. All right, well, welcome to the podcast today, everybody. I hope you've had pretty good weeks and everything has been going great. I have to tell you, I had the opportunity a couple weeks ago to participate and present, actually, at the California Math Council Central Section Symposium. What a great conference. We had about 600, 700 participants in the entire conference. There were some great keynotes by Fawn Nguyen and Peter Liljedahl, which, you know, if you've been listening to my podcast, you know Peter has been on the podcast. And I cannot wait at some point to get Fawn on the podcast so she can share with you some of the things she does with visual patterns. And man, she's just inspiring, especially when she talks about equity and really getting all kids to learn math at high levels. So what a great conference it was. I had also, before the conference, there was a pre-symposium leadership conference. I think that's what they called it. We got to hear from Joe Bowler, Mike Flynn, and Ma Bernadette. Some great information about, Joe's book, Math-ish, coming out, and Mike Flynn, Be the Guide, Not the Hero. Awesome, man. I learned so much about coaching on that one. And Ma Bernadette and her, there's a strategy she's been using with getting teachers and doing some observations and some co-teaching and some teaching and some modeling, which I think has been pretty amazing. So I cannot wait at some point to share all that. I know I say all that, and I realize that this podcast isn't even about all that. It was just so much great information. And my colleague and I, Christina Rubalcava, over at the county office where I work, we did a presentation. And again, I want to share all of this information, and I realize that this podcast is not even going to be on that. But it's coming. So maybe I'll just give you a little bit of taste. Like, keep an ear out. We are going to have a CMC Central debrief podcast coming up soon, where I'm going to invite one of the teachers that went, and we're going to talk about all the things that we learned, a bunch of stuff that was really cool that I think a lot of you will enjoy hearing about. What this podcast is about, and there were some sessions on this as well, but what this podcast is about using technology in the thinking classroom. Now, I know if you've been listening to my podcast, a lot of you know that I do a lot of things with building thinking classrooms. We spent all of last season with building thinking classrooms, and now we're really in an implementation phase. And we've learned a lot about what's been working and what hasn't been working, and what really actually needs to be solidified and clarified. One of the things that happened at the conference is Peter talked about the closing the lesson and what that consolidation looks like, what the homework looks like. We don't use the word homework. Check your understanding problems, right? And how that could really be clarified for teachers. When I was reading the book, I thought, man, I got to do all these things, and how am I going to fit all of this stuff in at the end of a lesson? And it really isn't about all these things. It's about which strategy you use and what's going to be most effective for that day. which clarifies a whole lot of stuff from Peter. So we'll get more into that. But when you're doing a task and you're even in the consolidation piece or the beginning, and you're using technology, we know that technology is a great tool for students to visualize mathematics, to explore some really great things about mathematics, and can be an awesome tool for instruction and for students to have some productive struggle. The question is, how do we utilize that technology in a thinking classroom when we're doing vertical non-permanent surfaces and we have students working in teams and they're up on boards putting their thinking on vertical non-permanent surfaces? How do we integrate that technology piece? So I had a chance to speak to one of our teachers here in our district about his use of technology in his thinking classroom. He uses he uses Desmos. You're going to hear our conversation, which is going to be mostly about Desmos. And Desmos is one of those programs, those tools that I know a lot of people out there are using, and we use it a lot in the high school level. Now, in this podcast, we are really talking about secondary mostly. So if you're an elementary teacher, you might find some things in. I actually have a podcast coming up where I'm going to talk to some people at our county office about using Desmos tools for elementary and secondary, so K-12, in the classroom. I think you'll really enjoy that. But for this episode, we really primarily talk about what's going on in a high school classroom and how we can use Desmos to do that. Now, Desmos comes in there's two big forms of Desmos. There's Desmos Graphing Calculator, and there's Desmos Activity Builder, which is owned and run through Amplify. We talk about a little bit of both, but the questions that really we consider are, through COVID, kids got a lot of screen time, and we know kids get a lot of screen time now on cell phones, on video games, on this and that, on Chromebooks. How much of that screen time do we want to be a part of, right? How much of that screen time on a day-to-day basis do we want our 50 minutes that we spent with kids, or hour and a half, or whatever your schedule looks like? How much of that do we want kids to be on the screens? So we talk about that screen time, and we want to know what's effective use of that screen time. Should students be individually practicing this stuff on the computer or their Chromebooks? Should students be sharing a Chromebook while they're up at the thinking boards? Or should they be really engaged in the Desmos graphing or whatever the activity is on the technology, on the Chromebook, individually while they're up on the boards together? And how does that look management-wise? So we discuss all these things in this podcast, and I hope that this helps you when you're integrating this. Again, I am not anti-technology. I am so much for the good use of technology in the classroom for students to visualize, to see connections, to make connections and start to create their own understanding of mathematics through the use of technology. But how do we integrate that with a thinking classroom, with kids working on vertical non-permanent surfaces and student discourse, which has to happen? We do not want to walk in a classroom where every kid for 50 minutes is on a Chromebook in their own space doing their own work for 50 minutes, like they're without any discussion. Where is that discussion? Where do kids have chance to talk to one another about things? So how does that look? Hopefully you'll enjoy this discussion, and let me know in any of the comments in any socials. Reach out at MyEstusMath or at MyEstusTeach on X, and let me know what you think about teaching with technology in a thinking classroom, and what tricks you might have learned. Thanks a lot. I hope you enjoy this episode. And it's the new iPhone. It's the 17 plus or whatever it is.
15. Yeah?
15.
Yes. 17 will be out
I
in a
got
few
it
years.
from the future.
That's impressive.
So I'm here with Grant McCormick from one of our high schools here in Ceres, and we were talking about building thinking classrooms. And I know we've been working together from last year. People have heard your voice on the podcast before, because we started with building thinking classrooms and looking at the book.
The book study, yeah.
The book study. And since then, you've been using a lot of the practices, especially Toolkit 1 with the vertical whiteboards. And there was a question out there that was posed on a Facebook board about people using technology and manipulatives for using with BTC. And I thought, you'd be a great person to talk to, because I know that at the high school here, use a lot of Desmos activities and other types of technology that you can integrate with the students. So I thought it'd be great to talk to you about how you use technology with building thinking classrooms, especially well, let's start here. Every student has a Chromebook in our district. So when you're using something, we'll talk about Desmos, when you're using something like Desmos for graphing, how do you manage with students having their own Chromebook and up at the vertical whiteboards on a task that you're doing?
So I think it starts with teaching them the technology, not at the whiteboards. I do a lot of demonstrations of, I teach them all the tricks on Desmos. We're starting our Unit 4 this week with solving equations and inequalities, and I want them to eventually be able to solve Pythagorean theorem equations and that kind of thing. And so I needed to teach them how to do a root. And there's, typing shortcut, nth root, NTHROOT, having all my kids type that. And so,
I think you just taught everybody something new right there.
There we go. You can also type the word table and it makes a table. Imagine that. It starts with those pieces. With the students I've had this year, sometimes that kind of stuff seems optional. And so I've been doing a little bit more accountability pieces where I have the kids log into Desmos and hey, I just want you to do all these things. And I'll give them a picture of hey, I want you to show me that you know how to type in these math layers, fractions inside of parentheses with an exponent outside, all sorts of stuff. And then have kids log in, and then they save that link, and then they submit it to me in Google Classroom to hold them accountable for that piece first. Because at the beginning of the year, doing the building thinking classrooms this year and doing it from the beginning of the year, I was kind of just thinking I've done this before. I was really successful with the group last year, and it was kind of a little bit all over the place at first. Doing a lot of the DI with the technology was really, I think, where I had to back up to get to. Because it's you want the kids to, and when you're doing their thinking, you want them to consult the resources that they think they need. And,
right, yeah.
And, sometimes they don't realize what they need. And okay, I think you need to go back, send someone from your group back to get your Chromebook. So I would always leave that as an option. Okay, before I say go, we talk about, okay, what's the task? What supplies might you need to take with you? What, at some point, are you going to remind you that at some point you might need to send someone back to get a Chromebook for if the calculation gets too hard, that kind of thing. So I try to do a lot of that kind of prep work before doing it. Then once actually doing it, there's also struggles there because I have if you can't see my classroom, but I have whiteboards all on 3 walls of my room, but there are no ledges to speak of for the Chromebooks. And while we do have the great almost 360-degree rotation on the hinges of our students' Chromebooks, then that takes away the keyboard, which is, some of the tricks I've taught them. So I was this is not quite how not quite working out how I would in a perfect world kind of thing. One thing I've found that maybe can help with that is I our district has looked into flexible seating options. We've been demoing a couple pieces of furniture. So I have a couple of tables here in my classroom that are bar height and actually whiteboard top as well. Rearrange my classroom for all sorts of different activities, and
they're pretty easy to move.
No,
No,
no, but I'm
noticed
still
that
young.
you moved them in a certain area.
Yeah, right now they're not positioned for that what we're doing today. But yeah, just the collaboration piece within the groups with the technology is super hard. It even kids that would lean it up against the whiteboard. They're not all looking at it, and it's the ledge is low. Even if student desks are moved over there, that wasn't ideal because some of them are hunched over and
Right.
opting out. And just the bar height seems to be the perfect height to kind of have those if you can lucky enough to get that kind of furniture.
Yeah, I know we were lucky. You were lucky enough to get these. These are really awesome with the stools that kind of come out and in. It's possible people could do it for cheap. Find a estate sale with a with a bar height table.
We're actually looking into seeing what more can we order, and I actually think maybe these ones might be a bit on the expensive side to kind of make happen for our whole department. So, but I got another piece that we're looking at that's a same kind of table, whiteboard top, and bar height, but not with the stools because sometimes some students do really a lot better at standing, I've noticed.
You kind of want them to stand anyway, right?
But even in everyday lessons,
Yeah,
just
everyday
some of
lessons.
them at desks, some of them at tables, I think is maybe not necessarily a bad idea.
Oh, yeah. We know kids get fidgety. Now, just for reference, you teach 9th grade.
Yes, sorry. Yeah,
Yeah.
I teach integrated math 1, which is mostly freshmen, a couple sophomores and juniors sometimes.
Yeah.
That's introducing the building thinking classrooms framework to them is a fun journey to kick off high school for them.
Yeah. When the students go up with a Chromebook, let's say they're doing something with Desmos and they go up with a Chromebook, do you normally have them open up Desmos and look through some things while they're seated and then put them up to the task with one Chromebook, maybe one Chromebook per group?
I've tried different ways. I can't say that I've necessarily found that one way works in the other. It will kind of depend on the task and maybe where we are in the unit. I do think that maybe towards the beginning of a unit, getting them all to do it is a bit more important. Otherwise, the kid that's taking the initiative to get the Chromebook, isn't necessarily involving the others in what they're doing there. There's the looking over the shoulder for one kid and another kid reading off the numbers, but just the equal participation in there especially at the beginning of a unit isn't always great when there's only one Chromebook. Even though I like to say, okay, get the resources you need, sometimes I kind of have to put my foot down at the beginning and say, I think you all need to take your Chromebooks for this one, and just to kind of establish the tone.
They are 14.
They are 14.
They are 14
some,
or 15.
Some 13 for a couple months at the beginning of the year.
13,
even, 13, 14, 15, 16.
Yeah, and having a 14-year-old, 15-year-old of my own.
Yes, of course.
Yeah. So I know I went to we had a conference here in Stanislaus County. I believe it was Dan Meyer that was there, and he had mentioned try to do one Chromebook per group or per pair.
Yes.
And I have seen a difference when a pair is working on one Chromebook or a group is working on one or two Chromebooks rather than everybody have their own Chromebook. I noticed when everyone is kind of they start to try to do their own thing. So I wonder. I just wonder about that. Have you seen, because you said you tried different things, have you seen it work differently for other students?
Yeah, the randomness of the grouping always is like, oh, this is just a total new group dynamic between the three of you that I've never seen before.
Yeah.
Towards the end of a unit, I do see those successes with the one Chromebook per group kind of a thing. It's just the initial, it's the the physicality of actually using it rather than watching someone else use it. Because, you know, like, how do I do an exponent? Oh, it's shift 6. And like, my kids aren't even thinking shift 6 anymore because they've done it.
Right.
That kind of thing. So just building that muscle memory of it.
Right.
That doesn't happen when there's only one Chromebook per group. So I have to do a lot of that, like I said, towards the beginning of units. So.
Yeah, and I think all that direct instruction that you do for what they're doing on Desmos is really important, right? There's a lot of skill and pieces that they're just going to need to be able to do those things. Mm-hmm. It gets me thinking of what am I thinking? You know, I think that a lot of people think that kids nowadays just have this innate ability to use technology.
No.
Yeah, we're both shaking our heads. No, and
No.
they don't. They're more curious about it, but they still have to be taught how to use things.
Yes.
And I can say, though, looking at some of your students that have come out of your classes in the next over the years, this school's really, the kids come out with such a great proficiency in using graphing technology, especially Desmos, because that's the primary one that you use.
Yeah.
But as we see them getting into AP Pre-Calculus and AP Calculus, where they have to transition from using Desmos or app-based to handheld calculator, they're picking up things pretty fast. So I think the work that you all are doing with using that technology in class is really paying off in the end. But you have to, like you said, like directly teach them how to use it and how to use it appropriately. So I just want to say I think you guys are doing a great job with that.
Yeah, thank you. It's the equalizer really, because the in terms of getting kids to do a task, and the amount of time that students will take to do something by hand, it's, some of them want to just pull out their phone, and I'm like, all right, no, do you have the Desmos app? And
yeah, there you go.
I'm like, all right, you should download the Desmos app, and it's not quite as when I have them use it, I don't have them actually use their phones. There's just the keyboard layout and all that kind of stuff really just is a whole lot more powerful and speedy in trying to, like I said, equalize, getting everyone on the same playing field. Okay, here's this calculation, and now can we focus more so on the higher level standards of proficiency, and like, what does this all mean?
Yeah, absolutely. Going back to the one Chromebook per group, you were talking about something, and it had me thinking how it could. One thing that could be done is the same thing that we do with the marker. I know that some teachers have done. Okay, so during this task, they rotate the marker, right? So you start with the marker,
yes,
and then after 10 minutes, somebody else has the marker, or in the next problem, you have the marker and you rotate the marker. And I wonder if rotating the Chromebook could give them that ability to be using that Chromebook during that task at the same time. So the Chromebook becomes just like the marker in that it rotates every person.
Yeah,
Have you tried that?
I've tried that a few times.
How has that worked?
It does have a very similar effect, like you kind of said. Again, it's just not the first thing I would try.
Yeah.
Unless it's like, our last unit was we tried going through scatter plots, and so entering large sets of data. That was a good one to rotate around. All right, okay, there's 10 rows here. Someone do 3 rows and hand it off to the next person, and read the numbers out to them and give them things to do to make sure that they're all participating is really the key.
Right.
With the eventual goal that they're kind of doing that themselves, but just they need to be taught that at the beginning.
Yeah. Okay. Good. Well, see, you're the right person to talk to. You tried all these things.
Yeah, I mean, it doesn't go perfect every day by any means. Sometimes I'm like, all right, no, everyone's still doing the Chromebook. Even though I'd like to have moved on to this, to the kind of the gradual release of that, but just keep adapting to whatever they're ready for.
Yeah. When does it ever go perfect, right?
No. Yeah. Even at the end, it's not totally perfect, but they're better than they were before.
So, is there any other technology besides Desmos that you use with your students regularly?
Electronic technology? Not really. You were mentioning manipulatives, and so I know that I haven't used them yet, but I know that some other teachers in our site have done algebra tiles, and I'm considering. We've gotten magnetic sets for the whiteboards, which work really well.
Oh, that would be cool. I see that you have magnetic graphs up there.
That's the manipulatives for the whiteboard stations that I've used the most in the first semester, because we did graphing sequences and then linear versus exponential functions, discrete and continuous, and so I have a lot of just these. They're probably like a square foot, with 10 by 10 grid, and it's one quadrant, and if you put 4 of them together, it can make all 4 quadrants, and just depending on what I need for the day, it's just slap those on or take them off and stash them, and so make sure if you're purchasing extra whiteboards, make sure they're magnetic, because you won't want to do without that.
So that helps. If they're magnetic whiteboards, that helps. I know a lot of people use the white books or something that will stick to the wall, or glass. I know a few teachers here use their windows.
Windows, yes.
So that makes it a little trickier with the manipulative that's magnetic.
Yeah, I mean the white books that we've purchased for our site have a other side that does have a grid on it. But I really like these.
Like these, yeah. Ones. So let's go back to the algebra tiles. So do you have some plans to use those?
Definitive plans, not exactly. I know that the algebra tiles work really well for solving the simple linear equations and that kind of thing. And so we just started this unit this week, and we've got a vacation coming up in here, and I'm trying to figure out.
Oh yeah, that's right.
What am I going to teach before the break, and what am I going to teach after the break? So I would like to. I'm looking at doing the algebra tiles next week, but I'm not sure exactly where I'm going to be in terms of using them. But the goal is to get the manipulatives into it, and the algebra tiles. Again, magnetic is the way to go with those. To get the kids moving around and on the vertical space, so that as we've talked about, that kids around the room can see how they're being used.
Yeah, the vertical space is key. So I don't know if I have any more questions. I mean, that was a lot. I think Desmos is one of those main things that we use at this school. I know we have other forms of technology in here. You've got this beautiful what is this screen called?
The ViewSonic TV?
ViewSonic TV.
Yeah.
Do you have kids up on that? Do you use that as a vertical surface?
I haven't done it a whole lot. I've really leaned into it being a second screen, because I have my normal projector here, and displaying, okay, hey, here's what we're working on, the slideshow of the day or whatever, but then I go over to there to demonstrate it, so I'm not having to pull a Desmos window onto my projector and do that, and then wireless mouse and keyboard, I can control that TV from anywhere in the room, and I'm using it more for that kind of thing. But I have had students do stuff on it a couple times. It just kind of depends on how much information I want to be displayed during the whiteboard sessions.
True, very true. Yeah.
And I feel like often I want a lot, so generally that I don't let students work at that if that's what I'm going for, but I try to when I can.
I was speaking with another coach, and I did a lesson in a room, and I had students, when we consolidate, I have them come over to a board, and was doing this high school, and there were some tall kids in the class, and so these were boys, the tall guys were in the front, and you had some students like they were trying to look over the tall kids. So we thought one thing that we have here in this district that's starting to fan out is wireless document cameras. And so I thought maybe taking the wireless document camera, and as they come over, also using the document camera to just project basically the whiteboard that we're looking at, we're consolidating onto the screen, so that you have two places you could be looking if students are short, or I shouldn't say students are short. They're not as tall as the people that are taking up space in the front. Yeah, that they can still see the screen. Do you have one of those?
I do. Mine's been a bit temperamental. I need to I don't know. There's all sorts of tips on where to put the remote and to make sure there's good the connectivity, because like, I don't know, I feel like if I go far enough away in my room, it like cuts out, kind of thing.
Yeah.
So yeah, they're great. Yes, I have done that with success, but I just feel like mine is a bit temperamental on the connectivity piece of it. But do it when you can. Yeah.
Cool. Well, Grant, thank you for taking some time this morning
Sure.
to talk to me about using technology and BTC. Again, I appreciate all the work that you're doing, especially you were talking about how you really are cognizant about getting kids to use their tools appropriately, which is one of our math practices. So getting them to think that way, I really appreciate the work you do, and thank you for taking the time this morning.
Always a pleasure.
All right.